delivers lips on the biggest ass in the WWF.
So wrestling's a thing, huh? What is going on, Collective, and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about wrestling. A lot of you may not know, but back in my early middle school days, I was a huge fan of wrestling. I used to watch wrestling a lot. Now, there are a lot of eras of wrestling. The era that I am most familiar with is the Attitude Era. And the Attitude Era is like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, Undertaker, I think his name is Kano, or Kane. Now, you know, I gotta look it up now. It's Kane. A lot of people consider the Attitude Era of wrestling the best era, but I think that's primarily due to nostalgia. But regardless, the primary reason I'm bringing up the Attitude Era of wrestling is because that era of wrestling produced some of my favorite wrestling games, specifically for the N64, and specifically WWF No Mercy. Now, this game was a game I used to play competitively with some of my family members, and I remember having a hard time getting into the game as far as like the controls go and performing certain moves or finishers. It took a lot for the younger version of me to kind of navigate the controls of that game, and even when I most recently played it a couple weeks ago, I was still extremely confused about how to control my character. Probably because I tried just jumping into a match specifically, but it's not completely obvious how to do certain things in the game, so I had to literally look up the controls online and figure out how to do certain things like pinning, grabbing, the different attacks. The different attacks are all mapped to one button. It's just a matter of how you hold the button or not, which is very interesting choices. All of the characters that I remember, of course, are in this game from that era. A lot about this game really just is a nostalgic trip for me. I figured since I've been playing a lot of classic games, I had to take a look at No Mercy because this game had a lot of content in it. You had a championship mode where you could like go through certain stories with characters. I believe you could create your own character and, you know, train your wrestler and, you know, basically self-insert yourself into the Attitude Era and the lore of the game. You could go up against very famous wrestlers, pick and choose moves from certain characters to equip on your own character, and it was honestly just a fun time. You could customize the look. I mean, back then, this was like peak of like custom character creation. But it was always a fun time with me and my cousins in New York. I remember playing on this little Hey You Pikachu Nintendo 64 and always having like the lowest number player play with like the broken controller, and it just floods my mind with so many memories, this game. But going back to the game itself, a lot of the models are very interesting. The Rock, for example, this is a time period where he had hair, the theme songs, the openers for all of the characters when you started that game up. As low quality as it is in comparison to now, obviously, it felt like the most like accurate thing ever, you know. Obviously, like the images on the screens that appear behind the characters when they enter were literally just pictures. Sometimes they flashed, and of course they changed, but it was basically like a very extremely basic GIF. There are so many like specific details of this game that I have to appreciate. The graphics alone kind of makes it a little bit more memorable for me. and how hard they really tried with this game. It's not like a first party, so it's not like they had like the real budget for it, but you can see the love that they kind of put into this game because of how marketable these characters were and how successful wrestling was in this time frame. It's definitely my favorite wrestling game, and of course games nowadays have better quality, but there is just something so interesting to me about this game in particular. Aside from all of the venues that you could fight in, the different modes, the tag teams, the cage matches, things of that nature, being able to control these titans of wrestling and playing competitive with friends in a living room is just not something that you can kind of simulate in this day and age, which is very sad. And I am no longer interested in wrestling that way. And I've mentioned this a couple times, but there were just some very interesting storylines with wrestling that I remember liking a lot, and while I can't really remember too much of it, there are very notable moments of wrestling that I think people can easily quote. There's a very famous Vince McMahon quote that gets passed around with John Cena and Booker T. I don't even have to explain it. If you're interested in wrestling at all, you already know what I'm talking about.
Keep it up, my nigga.
You already know what it is. And there's a lot of famous quotes from The Rock. Everyone had their very signature style. Stone Cold Steve Austin with the beers. You had The Rock and his famous quotes and moves. Rikishi and the fact that he had his little signature move, Stink Face, which is crazy to me. Now, me personally, I wouldn't stand to have cheeks in my face. I do, however, have some Discord users that I'm sure would enjoy something like that. But having all of these characters and being able to play with them when really obsessing over them on TV all the time is just something that I remember very fondly. This game holds a very special place in my heart because of that time period that I remember very, very fondly. Now, I don't know when I started to lose interest in wrestling, especially because there's so many storylines and directions that they've been taking it. Maybe it's when I realized that wrestling was not really real. I think that was kind of something that turned me away from it. But it's something that I have to appreciate in the present time period, because now I can see, obviously, that when you start looking at wrestling more as strictly entertainment rather than a truly competitive sport, you get a lot more enjoyment out of it, knowing that this has an overarching story and lore to it that a lot of people don't realize. I have come to appreciate wrestling even now. I respect it because it takes a lot of stamina, a lot of strength to keep up with this kind of thing. And it's definitely a medium that, even though I still am not that interested in anymore, it is something that I can respect and understand why there are so many fans. And honestly, when you are around people who are very passionate about anything, you gain an appreciation for it. And that's what this game helps me remember. It helps me remember a time period where I was truly interested in this kind of media. I wasn't ever interested in watching sports, basketball, football, anything like that, but when wrestling was on, I was all over it. I remember like gathering with family members to watch matches that would only appear on certain days, and there's just nothing topping that feeling for me, especially back in the day. Now, I do have an upcoming project that I'm working on with a friend. It's not like one of my projects, but I'm going to be featured on another video from a Discord user who is very interested in wrestling. He's been introducing me to certain regions of wrestling, specifically in Japan, which he knows that I'm very interested in. He's having me review some matches and kind of give him my input as someone who's no longer really interested in wrestling. So it's a very interesting concept of a video that I am going to be recording very soon. So when that video does release, I will update the description so you guys can have a link to that, of course, so you guys can check that out. And I will, of course, have a link to his channel so that you can see when that video will be out as well. It's going to be a very interesting time. I'm very excited to watch the match and kind of analyze things and kind of see the difference, because I still remember the Attitude Era very fondly. And it will be very interesting to kind of see the difference between regions and talk about that. So I'm very excited. One of my favorite things in the Attitude Era was various intros. I've said this already, but very specifically, my favorite wrestler Rikishi and his group, Scotty 2 Hotty, and the other one whose name is escaping me right now and I don't feel like looking up. Okay, so I looked it up. It was the duo, Too Cool, which consisted of Grandmaster Sexay and Scotty 2 Hotty. And they would have like a dance routine post-match, and Rikishi would join in on them. And it was like the coolest freaking thing to me, and it was what really solidified this character for me. But collective, that is enough of me rambling. I know this was more of a shorter video. Wrestling is not typically a topic I talk about, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of revisit this game, have it play in the background, of course, and kind of talk about my experience or emotions towards wrestling, because it's not something that a lot of people know, and it's not something that a lot of people really celebrate or focus on, especially in this time period where the pandemic had hit and the popularity of wrestling isn't as large as it once was. I'm hoping to see a resurgence of that. I've seen a lot of people on my timeline. There is someone who occasionally is on my timeline who wrestles, Stephanie Sterling, and she is a wrestler for, I think it's like a third party sort of situation. I'm not too familiar with like wrestling outside of the WWF, but there are a lot of smaller groups, and she's part of one of those. If you guys have stayed this far into the video, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. I do have more videos that I am working on, one of which is extremely long to edit. I haven't had a chance to go back and edit that because I've been so focused on my 60-day challenge, which, by the way, update, I use Rosetta Stone to study, of course, and I've been studying a couple of things, such as directions and very simple commands and asking for directions and placements of objects or people, workplace, environments, a lot of different vocabulary to grow my repertoire, as well as some kanji on my kanji app. I've been learning a lot of kanji as well. I am going to continue updating you guys every video on my status. But at the end of this all, of course, I will talk about things in detail in another video. And for now, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will catch you guys on the next one. I appreciate your face and everything it does. Peace.